Kia ora, everyone. We'll make a start. So it's been from one Zoom webinar to another today. So apologies for being a little bit late.
Oh, thank God.
So we're talking today about helping young people to quit smoking, and I'm going to start off by saying there's not a whole lot of good news here in terms of what we can do to help people stop smoking, but there is some good news, of course, in that we're making a little bit of a difference in smoking prevalence in our younger age groups. So for years now, we've had the ASH Year 10 survey. These are the latest data. So just a snapshot of the top line results here, which show that 81% of Year 10 students in New Zealand have never reported smoking at all. When you look at daily smoking, we're down around about 1.9%. So really good low numbers. Obviously, we'd love to see those all at zero in terms of smoking, but you do still get some experimentation. You look at changes over time. I think this is where you see the good news. Blue line here, never smokers, regular smoking, and daily smoking. We often see reports of we often compare or look at smoking prevalence in terms of daily smoking. However, I think when you're looking at young people, we really need to consider regular smoking as well, because actually most young people don't smoke daily. And if you're thinking about a Year 10 student, we're really talking about where you can get a cigarette every now and then. So I think it's good to look at both figures at the same time.
Is there any data to show why the never smoking graph is going up with this group of people?
Well, I think one of the key things with tobacco is kids are very price sensitive. So as they become more and more expensive, that you see a drop in smoking prevalence in young people. Pregnant women are the other particularly price sensitive group as well. But then you've also got Smoking Not Our Future, so mass media campaigns that are decreasing the social acceptability of smoking also. So it's been multifactorial. There are still, however, quite marked ethnic differences. Here you're just looking at daily smoking rates, and you can see Māori still have the highest prevalence of smoking, then Pacific, and then non-Māori, non-Pacific. So we've still got this massive task to try and reduce the inequity that we see in ethnicity.
And so the high Māori and Pacific smoking rates, do you think that correlates with high rates of their parents smoking?
Yeah, it's very much so. And if you look at just smoking rates in adult population, they're highest among Māori, then Pacific, and then non-Māori, non-Pacific. And if you're looking at Māori, it's higher in young Māori women. So we've already got young Māori girls here that have the highest rates of daily smoking, and this is daily smoking, not regular smoking. So it's still a group that we need to probably reconfigure our services a little bit better. Now, there we're talking about Year 10 students, and Year 10 are what, 14, 15-year-olds?
14, 15,
yep. But if you look at daily smoking by age, and this is from the most recent New Zealand Health Survey data, with the Year 10 stuff, we're looking down here.
Yeah.
But look at this group here.
Jumps at 18.
It just jumps at 18. So actually, this group is probably, as for smoking cessation, we probably shouldn't focus on too much.
There is some. I remember there was some evidence about going into schools and presenting to that age group about the harms of tobacco actually makes them curious.
Yeah.
And they want to try it.
Yeah, I mean, school-based interventions are not particularly great at doing anything here. And I certainly wouldn't spend my time as a stop smoking practitioner going into schools.
Right.
But maybe going into universities, maybe going into trade workplaces where these young people are.
And that's where they're starting.
And that's where they're starting, yeah. If you take young men are very unlikely to go and see their GP. Right. They're also very unlikely to engage with the health system on a regular basis. So, they're not coming to us through the regular pathways.
So they're not getting those brief messages
No.
about have you thought about
Yeah.
stopping smoking.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, this is an age group I think we should just focus on a little bit more, this 18 to 34-year-old, which has the highest smoking prevalence, and how could we target them a little bit better? So why the high uptake in young adults? So young adults, we're talking 18 plus. Well, there is an increased risk in a number of behaviours associated with significant life changes. So you leave home, you go to university, or you go to Polytech, there's new activities, there's new peer groups. There's also some stress in these life changes as well. So when you're transitioning from living at home with your parents to suddenly being out on your own, you're interacting with new peer groups. And you know, most people say they started smoking because their friends did, or the peer pressure. You're entering a workforce, you're trying to establish a new identity for yourself. So all of these things create greater risk for taking up smoking, as well as taking up other drugs, hazardous alcohol use. So these things are often packaged together.
And so all of those other risky behaviours would go up at the same time.
At the same time, yeah. You've also got, if you're working, greater disposable income. So there's, and you all know perhaps when you've left home and you started working and suddenly you've got all this money.
And freedom.
Yeah. You can go crazy. So that's a key factor. And of course, you can then legally buy cigarettes and alcohol once you turn 18.
Not that we ever did any
No,
of this.
never. Now, when you're looking at young adults, and these are data from a paper published a few years ago in the New Zealand Medical Journal, relatively small sample size, but just looking at these data, just over half had tried their first cigarette after turning 18. So this sort of makes sense when you're looking at that significant life course, leaving school, leaving home, smoking prevalence in your year 10s going down. Suddenly, perhaps we need to shift our focus a little bit here.
That's a real change, isn't it? From what was happening about even sort of 6 or 7 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. We've always focused on the under 18-year-olds, but it's shifted, and I think this age group doesn't have the focus that it needs. We also know that from these data, 66%, almost 2/3, had quite low nicotine dependence. And that's mostly because they don't smoke many cigarettes a day.
Right.
And when you're talking about heaviness of smoking index, which combines both cigarette consumption and time to first cigarette, you're really not looking at highly dependent smokers yet. And you can indicate there is almost 50% smoke their first cigarette after 60 minutes of waking. So at this stage in their life, they're not highly dependent. So it's not the nicotine dependence that's driving the smoking, it'd be the social interactions that drive it.
So after work on Friday night, they'll go to the local bar with a few mates, and it looks...
Absolutely. And so, in this group of people, treating them with probably just high-dose nicotine is not going to make much of a difference. But trying to address some of those social issues, what's the best way to get out there and target this group? I think it needs some thinking. Also in this data, smoking was really closely linked to drinking. So if you're drinking, these things go hand in hand. In our service at Counties Manukau, we screen for hazardous alcohol use. So we're already asking people about their drinking. And you talk to many smokers and they'll say, yeah, I always have a cigarette when I drink. And so that may be something in your treatment that you need to address. And it may be stopping going out on a Friday night. As horrid as that sounds for many young people, it's a real thing. And I think related to your question too, Grant, that second bullet point, smoking appeared to facilitate social interactions. So they seem to think that, especially if you've got friends that smoke, saying that, yeah, smoking's made it easy for me to socialise. Or help me meet new people. So these social interactions are really important when you're dealing with smoking in this group.
That's interesting. I was talking to one of the big vape suppliers in the South Island a while back, and I asked them about the number of under 24s who were buying vaping devices, and the manager said there were very few, but the ones who were coming in were looking to get a vape device. So when they went out socialising, they didn't have to smoke tobacco. They could still be with their friends who smoke and use a vape device. She said that was the most common reason that young people came in looking for a vape.
Yeah. The good news here, I think this is good news, is that young smokers are trying to quit. And 80% of these data had made a quit attempt in the last 12 months, and 50% had tried to quit in the last 3 months. So it's not that they necessarily want to keep on smoking. The price pressures are there. They know they should quit. They know the messages, but they're struggling as well. And part of the reason for this might be that they say, yeah, I'm just going to try it without any support whatsoever. This is really typical, and it's probably why we don't see many young people coming through our stop smoking services. Why? That's sort of for your hardcore smokers.
Yeah.
So most are trying to quit without support. So that's something that we probably need to change. For those that did intend to quit with support, the most common cessation aid was electronic cigarettes.
Yeah.
And that was back in 2015. So this is probably even more different now. So somehow we've also got to get involved and make it clear that we can help them with their electronic cigarettes as well. The other ways here are internet, and you can see NRT there at 45%.
And so, so people are just going to the supermarket, this age group, and buying the stuff and using it without any advice.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, if you're looking at, I just wanted to look at the vaping data, again from the New Zealand Health Survey. These show similar patterns, don't they?
Yeah.
So your daily vaping is highest in your same age groups as where smoking prevalence is high, although only 4% of this group
compared to what was the smoking rate?
So if we go back to the smoking rate, you're up around
20%.
Yeah.
Okay.
So certainly much lower. If you try looking at experimentation, it's still peaking in these groups. So these groups of young people are trying to do something, and it's that they are turning to vaping. So it's something I think we could capitalize on. Now, in terms of
something to stop smoking.
Well, exactly.
Right.
And say, look, we can help you and we can make this even more effective. In terms of intervention, so stop smoking intervention, so proper interventions including NRT, Zyban, individual support. This is the Cochrane Review, updated a couple of years ago. Over 13,000 smokers under the age of 20. So these are really in that younger age group. The only two approaches that showed any sort of promise are group-based treatment and programs that used a combination of a whole lot of different approaches. There's absolutely no strong evidence for any other intervention, including NRT, including Zyban. So I wouldn't focus all your efforts in just dishing out medicines for this group. I think you're really looking at big social support and trying to help them change their social behaviours. Vaping products might be helpful, as you said, Grant, for stopping smoking in social situations where you need to reach for something else. But it may be something to develop your group-based treatment programs more specifically for young people. And they do need a slightly different approach, I think, because young people typically have different drivers for smoking. So no sufficient evidence to recommend widespread implementation of any one model was what they found out in this.
So if you were asked to step into Wānanga campus or a Polytech campus to help their young people stop smoking, what approach would you take when you got in there?
Well, I think I'd have to be just like everyone else and try some different approaches here. But given we know they want to quit, I don't need to convince them they need to quit. So that wouldn't be my focus. My focus would be on, hey, we can make this much easier, and here are some really easy options where I'm not going to embarrass you. I'm not going to make it too hard for you. I can fit it in with your busy life. You can still socialize, because that's important. And No, I'd of course provide a range of different options, but I'd also include vaping in that as an option.
And what would you do to advise them how to change their behaviours and social circumstances?
Yeah,
around smoking?
I think avoiding those social situations initially would probably be really helpful in this group. It's not forever,
Right.
but we all know in the early stages of the quit attempt you're most vulnerable to relapse. So trying to put yourself in positions and going out with your non-smoking mates, for example, in the first few weeks is probably what's needed whilst you get your head around stopping smoking.
So behaviour support.
Yeah, a lot of change. So, I think this is what I'd focus on as young adults. So I'd not necessarily, don't forget and don't stop doing anything for the people under the age of 18, but focus on that 18 to 34-year-old age group. Go where they are and trying to increase the utilisation of your stop smoking services. That's what I do there, offering a variety of tools and making sure you're giving information on vaping, because clearly they're using it.
Yeah.
They're seeking information on it, so we might as well get in there and do the best we can to support them with that. And that was it on helping young people stop smoking. Take any questions.
Yes, Hayden. One question I wanted to ask, is you brought it up earlier with regards to entering schools and that. I've tried a couple of colleges, and I get the feeling I've sort of missed the boat as far as teaching them or trying to get them to quit smoking. What would your thoughts be on entering intermediate schools?
I think it's probably not good use of your time, is what I'd say. I think there is a role for health promotion, but the data show that the smoking rates are going down and down without stop smoking services working in that space. Where the real need is not at school, it's once they leave school. And you've got these young people out in the community that are not accessing healthcare, so they're not getting the ABC, brief intervention. And where are they? Where are they? How do we better reach that group? When you've got trade apprenticeships, you've got a lot of young men and young women now too, of course, entering apprenticeships. New time, often working with other people that might be smoking. So, how would you access them? Are there, big building companies, workplaces? Forestry, yeah. So trying to go where these young people are. Where are young Māori women? We've got these young Māori women projects that they're not going to come to us. Now, we've talked about this before, and we can put raising the flags and everything like that, although with pregnant women, paying them $50 to come along just to see you might be a way of doing that. So incentivizing them just to turn up so you can explain what you've got on offer actually may be a good use of funds.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Thanks for that.
No worries, Miles. I'm not quite sure where our chat function's gone, but just no chats there. Any other questions from anyone?
I've got a question about cannabis. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah. So young people will often confess that they smoke cannabis as well, and I'm not sure how to deal with that.
Well, I'll tell you how I deal with it, because I routinely ask about smoking anything else, and then they'll confess to smoking cannabis. And my advice is always, look, you know what, you should aim to stop smoking anything. There are, of course, the health risks of smoking cannabis are not exactly the same as the health risks associated with smoking tobacco. However, if you get into smoking, 5 joints a day, then you've got health risks from inhaling the products of combustion as well. I like to focus it all around the carbon monoxide monitor. And so I say, look, if you're smoking anything, you're going to get a smoker's reading. And the best thing you can do is to stop smoking everything. And keep it very simple like that.
Okay, thanks.
Now, Hayden, the vaping question. Now, I saw some figures last week in Whangarei with Edward and Grant. As far as vaping goes, how far away do you reckon it'll be before the government starts or Ministry of Health starts funding vapes? Because it seems to be the best way to go at the moment.
Yeah, and that's a good question, Maurice. I don't know that the Ministry of Health will fund vaping products, but you might see some DHBs doing that, especially for their more vulnerable groups, such as those with mental illness. It's a bit difficult for governments to fund things that are consumer products and not medicines. Funding would happen, of course, if a vaping device was registered as a stop smoking medicine. And that's always possible to do, but there's really no driver for vaping companies to do that because they can sell them anyway without going through all of the processes. You can buy vapes now in supermarkets and petrol stations. You've got Alt, I noticed, in a lot of places, or Vibe. For those of us who use vouchers as incentives, and if you're getting a $50 grocery voucher for coming along to the first session, then I suppose you could use that grocery voucher to buy your vape in the supermarket. So there may be some ways around where, not that I'm endorsing, of course, doing these sort of things, but there may be ways that we can think a little bit more creatively about how we might support our clients to try these things.
Just add to that, can the incentive vouchers, can they be used to purchase tobacco at supermarkets?
No, they're not.
What about alcohol?
Not alcohol either.
Oh, right,
Yeah.
okay.
So we just need to check. Well, the ones that we use can't be.
Right.
Yeah, you can get other vouchers that are, of course, don't have those limitations.
Cool.
Well, if there are no more questions, we'll wrap it up there. That was a nice, short and sharp teleconference. Thank you very much. I forget what our next one is on the list, but we'll let you know in advance. And until then, ka kere, stay well. See you next time.
Thank you.